This is why coaching's so powerful and other modalities that meet people, we often don't get listened to, right? Or have that kind of attention. So that's huge in and of itself, just to have a space where ideally you can be yourself and you can share what's going on inside your mind and heart and spirit. And somebody's listening, and not only are they listening, they're capturing it and they're reflecting back. Listening is key. You have to be a really excellent listener. Get aligned and listen to what's happening. Be able to hold a bunch of information in your head, trying to figure out what's the order, what's the important stuff, because you're kind of sifting for gold, right? You're looking for the big nuggets.
Yeah. You said you place the nuggets on the canvas. How do you identify what is the nugget there?
I'll make it as a coach, light the spark inside, empower every soul to turn the tide. I'll make it as a coach, help others grow, changing lives with every story I know.
On conferences that I attend in the coaching world and beyond, I often come across graphic recorders. They are these people who stand on the side or in the back of the room and capture the highlights of what speakers say on a huge canvas in a visually fun style. And as a very visual person myself, I always love this. And when I came across the work of Christina Merkley, at first glance, I thought she's doing something similar. And yes, Christina has been one of the pioneers in the graphic recording world, training with and for the growth consultants in California already 30 years ago. But today, Christina does not only do graphic recording, but she's going much deeper, taking both the graphic recorder and the role of the coach, holding space, asking questions, and then mirroring and manifesting the words of the clients on a canvas in a very unique style. So in this episode, Christina takes us into the world of graphic recording and visual coaching, how her own journey from a fly-on-the-wall note-taker into really deep visual work looked like, and how working visually can make a real difference, not only on conferences, but also in a one-on-one coaching setting. Let's go. It's a pleasure to have you here, Christina.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
And as a means of getting to know you, I was really fascinated when I came across your work because it really combines different methodologies in a very unique way, I found. So can you describe a bit what makes your work unique?
Well, you'd have to ask the people who I work with about what makes it most unique, but let me see if I can put myself in their shoes. I've done a lot of things over the years, and I still do a lot of variety of things, so it depends on what we're speaking about. But for the most part, I help people. I call it X marks the spot. Where are you standing right now? What's most up in your world? And I will use all sorts of techniques, but in particular, visual techniques, to literally draw out and mirror to somebody where they're standing, right? All the different factors outside and inside that are going on. And step by step, we meet that. But I also do work in the future, not just the now. We start in the now. Where do you want to go? Because I'm a coach. So, and usually people have got some sort of problems about maybe some clarity about where do they want to go. So we draw that out. Maybe they need some organization work. So we draw that out. Okay, that's where you want to go. How do you get there? And then sometimes, and this is my specialty, is alignment work. So that's where you say you want to go. That's your steps of how to get there. How come it's not happening? I call it the trouble at the border between where you are and where you want to be. So again, being in the work for about 25, 30 years, starting in strategic planning and corporations, I became very interested. How come when I can go in and do the same kind of process with groups or with an individual, why can some people so easily slide into it and why do others no, right? It becomes very challenging in maybe lots of different ways. So that's the secret sauce, right? What's going on in there? And for me, that's all about alignment.
And you just used the phrase, you are drawing out what's going on, which one could understand as pulling out, but you are actually drawing it, right? You are actually making it visible. And as someone who also has done a lot of, let's call it visual coaching using our picture cards, I was very curious when I saw that you are also doing visual coaching, but in a different kind of way. So can you describe a bit how does that process look like and what makes this drawing exercise powerful for the clients?
I think a key word is interactive. So I'm not fully aware of the full range of how you work, but for me, it sounds like it might be a little more static. Whereas the body of work that I come out of is a field, it's called different things. It's called graphic recording or graphic facilitation or visual recording, visual facilitation. Doesn't matter what you call it. The underneath of it, and I'll show you some things too. I'll bring up some slides because it helps with visuals to see things, but really it's about interactivity, doing it spontaneously as people are speaking, whether it's a group of people or a solo individual. And I'm using large I can use blank paper for things that are very emergent. But if people are coming to me for a certain kind of thing, I can have pre-prepared forms. If I'm working with a group, they're really big size, mural size ones, so everybody can see. Or if I'm working with an individual, we'll do this probably here soon enough. I don't think I can cram it completely over here, but maybe you can see the little corner of my drawing tablet. I can work one-to-one with somebody and really, as they're speaking, get that reflected to them. I have a whole cadre of tools. So depending on what's emerging from somebody, if we haven't already contracted to do a certain thing, a lot of times I get people who show up and we just figure it out. So they start speaking and I go, I see what's happening. Here's a tool that I can meet where you're at. And I can literally use that tool to help us meet that in a strategic kind of way, in a useful kind of way. And I draw it out. So I literally write out, some of it is words. So I write out the words and I'm very good at condensing and synthesizing things. But then there's also accompanying visuals. And it's live, so it's very fast and quite doodles, right? Not elaborate drawing. I don't have a formal art background. I've picked it up as I go along. Some of the people who enter this work, some of my students are really great illustrators. But in order to work in the spontaneous method, they have to let go of a lot of things that they know how to do. And that's hard for more formally trained artists because they want it all to be perfect and to add in the dimensions and the nuances and stuff. But this is not studio work. It's not sitting there solo creating something. You've got somebody right in front of you. You've got to keep their attention. You've got to meet their brain and their heart, right, as it's thinking and feeling things. So you got to be fast and just really do it spontaneously, as quick as you can to meet what they're saying, right? And to help them see that and then build upon it.
Yeah, so I know or I have seen what you're describing on big events where there's basically a graphic recorder and then they record kind of highlights of what the speaker on stage says. And I think you've also been doing that, but not only. What is interesting is that you also do this in one-on-one coaching inner work with single clients, right?
Correct. So I started in the early days with graphic recording when there was like 70 people around the world who were doing it. And we all knew each other. So I was a very young woman starting that. So I'm 57 now. I was, I don't know, late 20s. I'm a Canadian, but I went down to California where all cool things originate and went to grad school in San Francisco. And that's when I first stumbled upon graphic recording. One of the key founders of that field is David Sibbett with the Grove Consultants. And I ended up doing an internship when I was in grad school with him and his company. And they ended up hiring me. And so in my early career, I was a graphic recorder and I traveled all over the world as a literal visual fly on the wall, exactly like you're talking about with those large mural displays. And working alongside with the Grove, yes, it was emergent graphic recording like you're talking about, like a speaker's talking and you take notes. But what the Grove did, because they were organizational development consultants and change management consultants, they had a process called their strategic visioning process that didn't just do notes off on the side. It was actually very interactive, because they were there to do change work with organizations. And so they already had, in fact, when I joined them as an intern, they were just building a suite of tools to help facilitators be able to work in this visual method in this big form, the big format with the mural work. And I had excellent timing. I have horseshoes up my butt, as they say. So I've had very fortunate timing and luck. And so I, as an intern, helped them develop some of those early tools. And I've been hooked ever since with using not just emergent, like you're talking about, doing notes from blank paper off on the side when somebody's just a speaker, but actually using it in process work. And so there's real differences, and I have a slide coming up I'll share with this. There's real differences. I call them the four animals.
Yeah,
So
let's
the
maybe
first,
actually look at
yeah,
those visuals.
yeah, okay. Yeah, well, let me go ahead then, and I'll make a segue and bring up because it helps to see these things instead of just talking about them.
Yeah.
Put together a little slideshow for you here. There we go. Okay. Might as well show, because you asked about my career track, right? So you'll see me in my fresh-faced 20s, late 20s there in that top short brown-haired picture. And then the one underneath is what you're talking about, is graphic recording. And so you're off on the side with those large murals taking notes, and you're not integrated in. There's a separation between the speaker and the note taker. This has become very popular in the world. I've been an early teacher in it, trained a lot of people. It's gone global, not just me, of course, but my early colleagues as well. That's become very popular, so much so that you know it, and you can even use the words graphic recording to describe it. When I first started, nobody understood this stuff, right? Now it's gone global. Up above is just me in one of my trainings. So I've taught a lot of people, again, these four animals. And it's gone because of digital. Even before the pandemic, I was online, but of course, with the pandemic, everybody, including this field, went online. A lot of us are working this way now. So I continue to work both. The top picture here, that large mural method that we've been talking about, and then down below, the transfer into the drawing tablets and using web conferencing with the digital drawing. It's my day. I love my work. I get to work with people from all over the world. I might be working with corporate people, drawing out their visions and their plans, entrepreneurs, business partners, all sorts of individuals. Again, from people in the corporate world, entrepreneurs, and increasingly, I've learned so much about trauma. It's become a specialty of mine. So I also work with survivors all the way up to survivors of extreme abuse. So it's quite the range of my clientele and quite the range of what a day can be, right? Working here in my studio with my little doggy here and drawing out whatever's going on for people and what they're meeting. I love the variety too, because it really encompasses, what our world is about and what different citizens within our world are meeting. And then here's the four animals. And the four different ways of working with these tools, as I've taught them and as I use them as a practitioner. You could call them different things. This is what I call them. So on the far left is studio work. So I think this might be a little bit of some of the work you do, where it's the more static images. So you can do what I call push pieces, right? So if there's a certain model or a certain body of material or curriculum or something that you want to get across, you can create studio pieces to push information to people. And they're static, they're pre-done. They look usually quite more polished because you got some time, right? You're not immediately creating them with the client. You've created them ahead of time to assist whatever you're doing with your client.
So that means I already have an idea of the situation on the client's end. And then I would basically at home in the studio create a visual and bring that to then work with it together with the client.
Yeah. So for example, I know you work with a lot of coaches, and myself, I have my own coaching process. There are pieces for all of us as coaches. We have things that maybe we deliver repeatedly to clients. So it behooves you to create a little studio piece, right? Instead of just ad hocing it, or if you are doing any sort of visual thing, creating a more polished piece. It just makes your life easier. That's how I first started creating a lot of things for myself, because just repetition. I was like, I'm hearing this again and again. So I'm always paying attention where I hear things again and again from clients. Maybe I can create either a push piece where I'm sharing information from my kind of consultant or advisor kind of guide hat, or is there a pull piece that I can create where I need to get something out of them instead of me delivering material. What am I trying to pull out of them? And when we get to if we move to the two latter animals, the process work, that's where we're really pulling, right? Yes, we may use some push pieces to explain things to people. We're really wanting to help them get clearer on various things. And so we need to pull information out of it and reflect it back to them.
Yeah, and just briefly coming back to the work we do at MetaFox, I would say that is also a pull process in the sense that, yes, we bring pictures pre-prepared. Oftentimes it's photo cards, but then there's really a set of 20, 30, 50 photo cards. And we work with the group or the individual to pull what photo describes the situation you're in right now, or which one should describe the future vision that you have. And so it is much less artistic, I would say, because we don't create this in the session, but it's also I would say, interactive pull process where the client has this experience of self-efficacy. I choose something that is now stands for me or my issue, my goal.
Yes.
So that's where I saw the parallel. But of course, yours is much more, takes that to the next level.
And it's just a different way, a different aesthetic and a different way of working with things, but it's all visual. It all falls under, and it's interactive. So in a way, your work would totally qualify, of course, as interactive visuals in the way that I'm describing it. Yeah. And the strange and wonderful niche that I've come up through, being able to play a lovely role in midwifing it over these decades too, again, alongside many other people, it bumps up against all sorts of other ways of working visually. Many artists have discovered, particularly graphic recording, it's really changed the nature of the work. When I first did it, it was very basic, but the illustrative nature of graphic recording has gone through the roof. But where I most like to play is the two other ones where we really get interactive. So you're not just a person off on the side, you're actually interacting with that group, like what the Grove consultant does with their large scale process. Or like what I do, I really took it into working with individuals, particularly with coaching in the early days. But as I've evolved as a coach, I mentioned trauma work and I mentioned alignment work. For myself, I became very curious again for my clients that weren't getting fast turnaround results on their vision and on their action plans. What was interfering? So I had to learn a lot about what are the things that will interfere with a group or an individual in actualizing what it is that they say they want. Yeah, process work with groups, process work with individuals. Tons of things you can do with groups, and you can add a visual element to it, which will help. Tons of things you can do with individuals. If you get some visual skills in you, then you can help do that even more effectively, whatever it is you're doing with individuals.
Yeah, maybe we can briefly unpack a bit these different animals. And starting with the graphic recording, I guess this requires two major skills, actually. On the one hand, the obvious one, I think, is the actual ability to draw. But I guess the other one that maybe a person who's not familiar with this doesn't see in the first place is this staying super attentive and then also condensing what is it that they are really talking about here? Like, what are the key words? So I'm curious, how is that process for you when you do this live graphic recording of a conference, of a business meeting? What's going on inside your mind and what do you pay attention to?
Yeah. So there's two different natures to what can happen in a meeting. You're just brought in for graphic recording. So you're off on the side and you're note taking. So I can speak about that. But others, and this is what I prefer, I had a master's degree in organizational development. So I wasn't, as much as I love doing the speakers, because that's very interesting to listen to speakers and take notes of what they're saying. I was really into the organizational development work and the change management work. So as an early graphic recorder, I would be paired with consultants. First, it was internal at the Grove because they are a change management firm. Later on, well, even in the Grove, I would be paired with external people and they would hire me to be their graphic recorder. This is where I learned so much about process work with groups, because as a young graphic recorder, I was there as the visual sidekick, the visual note taker during an integrated process. Graphic recording so taught me to be in the now, like one of the, Zen gongs, right? Because you have to focus, like you said, and get aligned and listen to what's happening. And then both sides of your brain are working. Listening, I said that word, listening is key. You have to be a really excellent listener and be able to, as I age, this is getting harder, be able to hold a bunch of information in your head trying to figure out what's the order, what's the important stuff, because you're sifting for gold, right? You're looking for the big nuggets, not all the little stuff. Once you got a nugget, that kind of golden piece, boom, you have to synthesize it.
Yeah. You said you place the nuggets on the canvas. How do you identify what is the nugget there in what the
Well,
speaker or the
yeah.
facilitator says?
Yeah, so ideally, again, you've got it ahead of time, so you know the arc of what they're talking about, you know what the main points are, and when that person actually hits a main point, that's the nugget, right? If you don't have all that pre-work, then you're really relying on your own filter. And I believe that clients out there that hire graphic recorders, there's a variety of us. I approach things quite, like I said, with a mental frame, right? The mind. Others are much more artistic. So it'll depend on the client, what they prefer, and whose filter they like, right? In terms of the content. I would have people hire me over and over again. I would certainly have people who would never invite me back, and I might not know why. Right? So maybe that might be because my filter or my aesthetic or style or something wasn't to their preference.
Yeah, talking about how it's being received, can you describe reactions in the audience that you perceived over the years? Like when you do this sort of graphic recording and then a participant of the conference of the event comes up, looks at your work, what does it do with the audience? What does it do with the participants?
Well, with the graphic recording, we haven't talked about the facilitation yet. We'll get there. But with the graphic recording work, nowadays it's much more known. Back in the early days of doing this work, it wasn't. Even with people walking into the room, I would have it pre-papered, right? I'd get there early and ideally they had natural walls that I can work with. Of course, I'm going to be asking all those things beforehand. If they don't have natural walls, I'm bringing in big easels. And so those things make a statement. So when people walk in, they see that. Often I'm going to create some sort of welcome poster or an agenda poster or something ahead of time. So that's a big wowie in the room. So people right off the bat are like, wow, what's going on here? This is cool. What's this about? And in the opening of the meeting, the person will, of course, introduce me. And I used to always contract to please allow me to say a couple of words because if I'm a graphic recorder, they're never going to hear me speak after that. So it gives me the opportunity to say hello, hear my voice. And if the conveyor hasn't done a great job of explaining it, it gives me an opportunity to say something a little more about it and then disappear off into the side of the wall, right? And so then people are curious if they've never seen it and it's just white paper up there. Some speakers and some conference hosts, to begin with, if they haven't seen the method, can be concerned that it will be distracting. And it will be for a bit because the first 5 minutes or so, people are like, what's she doing? What's she doing? And they go back and forth. But as it goes along, I believe that the brain synchronizes with it. And because it's a human being moving at the pace and my body is moving as well, it's very humane. It's a very humane way to work. Unlike some of the things that are happening now with the digital stuff where your body's not actually there and they might not even see your hands. So I find it actually calms the group. And especially if it's intense material, it can become this third buffer that allows people to interact with content that's tough and make it a little more palatable and a little more understood.
That's super interesting because it's what would be obvious to me is when you say, yeah, it's a nice summary of the content and people can come and look and remind themselves, yeah, this was what we talked about earlier this morning. But it also has this element inside that it's not only a recording, but it also does something with the group. That's super interesting.
Even with graphic recording, yes, even though we're not integrated in yet, I would usually advise if you're going to have a speaker, the graphic recorder could actually be to the side or the back, like behind them, so that people can see the simultaneous graphic recording, or at least to the side. It's least effective if it's behind everybody because you're not seeing the interactive thing of it being built. Yes, you might turn around afterwards and go, wow, there's some good notes for us. But good notes, actually, the best notes are where the brain is seeing the notes be created as they go, because then it understands it. That's why I like the process work even better. You're front and center and you're co-creating it with people as opposed to being off on the side. And certainly you're not a party trick, which is where some of the graphic recording nowadays can go, where you're more a party trick. And it's not so integrated in neurally.
Yeah. So let's go to the process work, where I think you don't only have this awareness part and the actual like drawing part, but you are really also the facilitator, the space holder for your clients in this work, right?
Yes.
So how does that look like?
I'll paint you a scene for it. So again, I can also say, when I first started with this work, I was the graphic recorder alongside consultants. So it was 2 people at least. As I progressed in the work, I eventually emerged as a co-facilitator and then a lead facilitator. So nowadays, when I facilitate, I do both roles. I am the consultant, the change management person, and I'm doing the note taking all at once. So in the early days, if I'm paired with a consultant, again, I'm meeting with them ahead of time, and we have mapped out what we're going to do when, what tools are we going to use, what push pieces, right? So there's an agenda, maybe there's a different model, maybe there's a history map or something that we've got ahead of time that help them push information. And then we move into the interactive portions. And we may have blank paper, and I have colleagues in the field who do different kinds of processes, and they work more from blank paper, even though they know what they're going to do. I work a lot from templates. Again, I came up through the Grove consultants, so I really love their process, the strategic visioning process with them. But depending on that consultant, they're going to have different things that they do. And I'm right up there front and center. So instead of a speaker where I'm behind them or off to the side and I'm never speaking, if I'm paired with a consultant, they're doing certain things, that consultant is going to be right up there with me, with the board. You're going to see some templates here soon from the individual context, but in the group context, we've got to explain this because it's a process that we're going to do with people. So we're literally up there touching the board, touching the different parts of the components of the template, explaining the process, and then we jump in and we do it. And so they'll go to the first section of the template, the first step in whatever process they're doing. They'll tee it up, they'll ask the question, and then people are going to start answering those questions. I'm listening as they're giving that answer, and I'm synthesizing it because I don't have all the space in the world. People might talk in paragraphs, but I got to get it down to a condensed nugget. And I'm writing that onto the template. And then we progress step by step through the steps of that particular move that we're doing with those people at that point in time. You start with a blank template. By the time you're done, it's completely full. And the people that were present in the room, seeing it step by step be filled out, they've got the neural connection. They understand what that little, it doesn't have to be a perfect graphic, but they know because they heard that person say, hey, oh, elephant in the room or something is, I've drawn a little elephant. They know why there's an elephant, right? Because that was spoken. It's hard for people who weren't in the meeting. Sometimes somebody who was in the meeting needs to sit beside them and step by step, but they should be able to get the gist anyway from the meeting notes about what did occur, even if they weren't there.
Yeah. And how does that change when you are even on your own, when you have all hats on? You are the facilitator, the space holder, and the graphic recorder or interactor.
It's a real song and dance. You earn your keep, that's for sure. In some ways, it's easier because you don't have to coordinate with a graphic recorder.
Mm-hmm.
You are the graphic recorder. But I find that my aesthetic gets even more pared down. So it's going to be much more simple. And I always think it would be fascinating to hook us up to those brain scanning machines because I can feel it when my brain is shifting from left brain logic to right brain creative. And when you do both, it's got to be like very highly bridged. So I'm not quite sure how I do it. But as you do it over time, things become unconsciously competent. Like all the little doodles and drawing that I've done forever, I can do them with my eyes closed and almost asleep, right? So I can still be thinking on the logic of what I'm listening to while I'm drawing, right? So my brain is able to split and do both things at the same time.
And what is the impact on the clients compared to just being in a facilitated process without the visual aspect of it?
It makes it much easier for people to follow what's happening, be able to build on what's happening, and then to remember it. And even more important, to have accountability, especially if you're getting into steps and things that are going to happen. And accountability is a really important thing, right? And this is very public, right? It's very visual and visible. And it really helps with, hey, this is what it helps with buy-in. This is what we all agreed on. This is what we co-created. This is what you said you were going to do, right? There has to be follow-up. And so that will depend on the leader that I'm working with, who's brought me in, what are they doing with what I work my butt off to get for them. And the best leaders will really use that stuff and they will put it up. Sometimes things are framed, right? Laminated, right? The vision, the plan, all sorts of digital kind of artifacts and stuff, because it needs to live. The worst thing, and I don't like to do superficial work. I'm a deep person. If I'm going to go in there and work so hard, and I'm working on behalf of everybody, I'm not just working for the leader. So that's also a thing.
Okay, now we've talked a lot about graphic recording and also the process work where you would work with a group as a facilitator or as a co-facilitator together with another consultant. I think what's most interesting about your work is your work with individuals. Can you talk a bit about that? Who are these people that are your clients there, and how does a typical process go?
In the early days, I started literally with those people I was working in corporations with, saying, I can do this at the individual level too. So I started working with CEOs or HR directors, marketing directors, those kinds of people who had brought me into the organization. And they wanted me to maybe help them do strategic planning, visioning stuff around their leadership or around their career. I also would work with entrepreneurs, people who own these companies. Oftentimes they wanted me to work with their business partners or with their spouses even, because as they continued to envision new things, if they wanted to continue to have a happy, healthy relationship at home with the entrepreneurs, they would have me working with their spouse and with their family members and stuff, because sometimes there's intergenerational stuff going on in the family-owned businesses. So that's how it naturally started for me, and then it evolved over time. To begin with, I was a very, I came out of corporate, so I'm a pretty straight-laced kind of person, very linear and logical. Certainly interested in feelings and emotions, but the corporate world in some ways wants to cut you off at the neck, right? And just work with the mind and the doer. However, for some organizations, they might have some tough stuff going on. In the world nowadays, we've had tough stuff going on for multiple years. So more savvy around emotional intelligence has really been needed, and more savvy around trauma at large has really been. So that's unfolded for me over the course of my coaching. I started out very practical, very left brain, and I've integrated in the body, the somatic, the feelings, emotions more and more with my work. And that's separated me from the coaching that I first started out with and some of the bodies of coaching that exist. So I go deep now in my work. Yeah.
And how can we make that visual actually? Let's look at that. How do you go deep in a visual way? Can you walk us through the shifted process? You said it's an acronym that stands for the different stages of the process.
So the shifted visual coaching process, you see the name down here, SHIFT. There are 7 stages to this. So when people show up for coaching, with me anyway, sometimes they're keeners and they're just wanting to create the next stage of themselves. They're high performers. But a lot of times people come and there's some sort of problem. Their satisfaction has been interrupted. Maybe they're at a different transitionary stage. Sometimes it's loss. So it could be loss of a job, loss of income, loss of a marriage or a relationship, or of a person. There could be different milestones in life, a big birthday, anniversary sort of things. Nowadays, we have so much happening in the world. There's so many outside forces that are really interrupting people's intended paths for themselves. So that's the first stage. Their satisfaction is interrupted and they're coming for coaching. The first thing that I do, and I was not trained to do this as a coach, but I added it in later on. In fact, I was discouraged to go to the past. The next stage is harvest your history. I can do condensed versions depending on the amount of time that I have with somebody. If I have the full amount of time with them, I will go in and draw out their life map to bring them up to the now where the dissatisfaction is so that I can understand what's led up to it and I can help them see and appreciate what they've been through. And I also do a lot of extracting of beliefs.
So you would actually ask people, can you tell me the story of your life? And you would draw it out on a lifeline for them, the different stages, milestones, things that happened.
Exactly. Let me go show you a picture here. I can scroll down. There's a first little move, but here's the life maps. And so I have 5 templates. I start when they are born, what I call the arrival scene right here, right? And you had to put something down. So I'll put a stereotypical mother father there, but there I can change it. That's the nice thing with visuals. You can erase and you can adapt accordingly. By the way, you'll see on here my universal template, which is the icon yellow person, but I have various series of BIPOC versions. So folks of color can be represented as well. So I've got the early scene, I've got childhood, and then I've got adolescence and young adulthood, and then adulthood. And depending on how old the person is, and how busy their life's been, I might have several sheets that I do the adult life. And then I've got a little move at the end that's called catch and release. The so what of it. What are the ahas and appreciations? It's not every day you draw out your life map. So what are you seeing? Where's the gratitude? And then what do you need to let go of? Because there's some things that have happened to us that we need to leave. It's good to leave stuff and not keep carrying it and transform things. So that's the final thing, which is a little bonfire there of what are you going to leave behind and what are you going to transform it into?
Yeah. Yeah, and here we can see nicely the template, like what does this client want to let go of, the self-doubt, and what emerges from the fire. Can you describe a bit what is this doing in the process? I can see, and I've asked this earlier when we spoke about group work, but I can see this also as a 2-step process that while the client is describing their life to them or what they want to let go of, like already seeing you write it down, it does something. What does it do?
We'll see when we go to the demo and work with you, and you'll know it from the inside out. I think it does different things for different people. But first off, this is why coaching is so powerful and other modalities that meet people we often don't get listened to, right? Or have that kind of attention put on us. So that's huge in and of itself, just to have a space where ideally you can be yourself and you can share what's going on inside your mind and heart and spirit. And somebody's listening, and not only are they listening, they're capturing it and they're reflecting back. So I believe, and I know deep in my bones, that there's an active manifestation that happens when it goes from just being thoughts up there in the head or things that have been spoken a lot. When you put it down onto paper, that's an active manifestation. Of course, I'm going to continue to work with that person to get it actualized into steps and things in the world, right? If they've got a vision and a plan, that takes it to an even more level of manifestation on the physical plane. But this moves it out of air, right, into grounding. And that's very powerful. Also with the life maps, especially if there's different kinds of challenging feelings, by writing that out, same thing in organizations who go through tough stuff. And reflecting the now to people. If I keep going, I'll show you the now maps, right? This one helps people look at the 8 different areas of the now and have them give it a little score. How satisfied are you in these different areas? By drawing that out, it helps them like see and understand even more what they've viscerally been feeling. It helps make sense of their feelings, their emotions. Sometimes people don't. I know I'm the same way. They lose track of what's actually going on for them. But when you map it all out, good, bad, and ugly, They're like, no wonder I feel the way I do. There's some significant stuff. And the world at large right now, it's compounded. There's so much stuff that we're cooked in right now. And so drawing that out really helps people appreciate the significance of their now and what the swirl that they may be in. That's very validating. That's confirming. And it helps with feelings and trauma to meet them, to actually stop the dissociation and become more associated with what's happening. So these graphics help people get into the here and now and feel what they're feeling instead of distancing it from it. Of course, that can be very intense too. So some people will leave a session emotionally upset, but in the bigger picture, it's an important stage of the process, right? To come in contact with what's actually happening, to stop the denial or the dissociation and the minimization of stuff, and to come into contact with hello, wake up, what's really going on in your life or your career, whatever it might be.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see how you drawing this coaching process helps the client to materialize their inner world on paper, and they can see it outside of them. And I think that can be powerful.
A lot of it is the inner world. Yeah. And then it's also the outer world too. If there's different roles and different relationships that you have with people outside of yourself, then it's also codifying that as well. Here's the one that I was showing you that I was working with the client in the room with the big mural, the self-inventory. And so, yes, we've done the now, and we've done the history. This is one of the other tools in the now. So you're going into this shift. You're going into this transitional period. You're going to sort it out. What do you have to work with? So you've got your natural skills and abilities here on the left-hand side. And then, yes, they may have weaknesses. And I'll write on the other side the learning areas.
Yeah, I think that's often the story of people in the coaching world. I'm super curious to see this in action. So maybe can you lead us through the rest of the shifted
Showing
process?
you your options. Yeah, I'm going to go back up here. And so you've seen up to the middle. The heart of the process is focusing on your future. So that's all about visioning, right? That brings you up to your now. We do some analysis moves on the now. Then it's like, where the heck do you want to go from here? So I have several different moves that help people move into the future. I do picture decks too. Like what do you folks have? Collage kind of work, vision board kind of work, do guided meditations around meeting your future self, various things to help people tap into that future. And then we codify into what I call the magnetism map, which is their vision. And then we go to action plan, way down at the bottom here, take action. The vision, some people with their visions, tick, tick. Yep, I can do that. Yep, that's possible in that amount of time. No problem. Other people, not so much, right? Maybe the sum of the vision has a thumbs up, but some like, oh, I don't know. Should I? Could I? Will I? Then we have to do some mindset work, some alignment work, right? So in the process, I might have to do alignment work even to help people vision, because visioning can be a very threatening act. I talked about I work with people with extreme abuse. Some of those people actually have been heavy duty mind controlled to be literally slaves. They're not allowed to be sovereign. They're not allowed to vision. So I have to do a lot of work, and that's a whole involved process in and of itself with my shifting the power work with Annika Lucas. But that's heavy duty trouble at the border. The rest of us, we too have programming, right? We too have mind control from growing up in families and societies, and our beliefs get messed up. So we have to do some deprogramming light here to help folks line up with that vision, to make it okay for them to even dream. And then we have to match it up with some action, some doings and some beings. For the uber achievers in the world, I have to help them to not do, to do nothing, to be. And then for other folks, it's getting those doings figured out, but in a palatable way, not overdoing it, not burnout and pushing yourself, humanely, of creating plans.
So if a person would go the entire shifted process, how long would that take? Is it like one letter is one session, or how does that look like on a bigger scale if you zoom out of your coaching work?
Yeah. So what I've done over time, maybe this might be interesting for people listening, right? When you create your own signature process, To begin with, I was kind of mucking around. And then eventually I created my tools, and some of them have evolved and changed over the years. But for the most part, I nailed it pretty good. Then I had this whole process.
So you have, in a way, a modular process. And depending on the client situation, a different module might be more relevant than another. And you could also combine these sort of in some of the modules you would do in live collaboration, and others could be guided self-reflection process by the client where they work with your material and then bring it to the session to debrief that.
You got it. You got it. It's very flexible. With my certification, I'm putting all my tools, my 40-something tools in. 17 of those are this, right? So they get a ready-made process that they can do with the person. But even the tools within Shift It, some of them are good standalone tools. Like you and I are going to figure out in a second here what to do standalone. Not all of them lend themselves to standalone, but a lot of them do. So they're very handy. Same with my other tools, right? Yes, you can do them in the same step-by-step process like I've explained here quickly, but also you can just meet somebody where they're at. And if you do other kinds of coaching, you can take, oh, I'm doing this thing, and now I'm going to throw in some of these maps, right? So there's a lot of flexibility with them.
I see. So if I got curious now and I want to work with you, where can I find you?
Well, right in front of you is my website. So you come to this website, shiftedcoach.com. Usually people can have an exploratory chat too if they're not sure how they plug into my stuff, right? So I have a little exploratory chemistry call with people to hear what's going on for them and to match them up with the stuff that I do. What would be the best fit? Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
This was my conversation with Christina Merkley. I found it fascinating to see how visual coaching can go so far beyond what I thought graphic recording was. From drawing out someone's entire life map to visioning and alignment work, Christina showed us the whole spectrum of what is possible when it comes to bringing visuals into coaching. If you're curious to explore Christina's work, you can find her shift-it-coach.com. She offers private coaching retreats, online sessions, a visual coaching certification, and some of her templates as a free download. And if you want to work with visuals very easily in your own coaching, you can also go to metafox.online and try 3 sessions for free. The platform makes many aspects of Christina's visual coaching approach available also to people like you and me. And if you want to see how Christina works with her own tools, then just come back in 2 weeks from now when we will do a visual inquiry coaching demo with me. Christina takes me back into my past and helps me meet my future self. I'm Toby, co-founder of Metafox Coaching Tools, and this was another episode of the Impactful Coach Podcast. If you liked it, share it with your friend, leave us a like or a follow. I wish you all the best on your own journey of becoming an impactful coach. Cheers.
I'll make it as a coach, light the spark inside, empower every soul to turn the tide. I'll make it as a coach, help others grow, changing lives with every story I know.